High-risk police incidents range from an armed, barricaded suspect to someone contemplating suicide, and these can be complex and dangerous. And today we're going to take a look at how we handle those. Joining me today in the roll call room is Detective Kenny Henthorn to talk about the Skagit County Crisis Negotiations Team and the critical role they play in helping to solve these situations peacefully. Kenny, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Detective Henthorn.
Well, I usually go by Kenny, but okay. Yeah, whatever, that's fine.
So talk a little bit about your assignment as a detective and kind of other roles you've had here at Mount Vernon PD.
Yeah, so my primary assignment is detective. So with that, we do any major crime or maybe death scene investigation. And major crime is going to be mostly person crimes. Sure. Okay. But in addition to that, I do crisis negotiation on the part of our Skagit County Multiple Response Agency or team. And a defensive tactics instructor here. Before that, I worked as a field training officer for patrol. That's a lot of fun. I enjoy helping our newer officers get trained up, which is also why I'm in the DT cadre.
Okay. So started as a patrol officer, just like pretty much everybody? Pretty much everybody,
yep, start there.
And how long did you do on patrol before you got this assignment?
Oh, what did I do? Just over 5 years.
Okay. And that's where you were a field training officer?
That's correct.
New folks?
Yep.
Talk a little bit about what that process is for a new officer.
For the new officers, when they come in, I mean, it takes us close to a year before we can get them trained up and on the road, ready to take their own calls. And that process starts with academy. Well, it starts with getting hired and then into the academy. And once they're out of the academy, they kind of have that theoretical understanding of law enforcement. Now we're going to put them into the field and with a seasoned officer, someone that can help guide them. We don't want to make every police officer like me or like the other training officers, but guide them to be the best police officer that they can be. So we start out slow, kind of showing them how we do the job, teaching them things like geography and how the radio works, talking a lot about responses. And then slowly we integrate them into driving and then respond to calls themselves, handling the majority of the call. All the way to the point where we're fully removed from the vehicle that they're in, right, that they're assigned to, and we're following them to their calls and just making sure that they're not making a major mistake, right, violating someone's rights, putting somebody in danger, and they're able to do this job adequately on their own with less supervision than when they started out of the academy.
Okay. And you mentioned defensive tactics.
Yeah.
What's that mean?
Defensive tactics. So police inevitably end up in encounters where someone maybe doesn't want to go in custody. And we, as a defensive tactics cadre, work with arrest tactics and how we can take that person safely into custody that maybe is resisting or maybe becomes assaultive to police officers. So we work here in the mat room. There's 4 of us in total right now. And teaching officers, approved upon tactics for using force when it's necessary to do so.
You talked about doing it safely, and that's not just safely for us. We also want to do it safely for that person so they don't get injured at all.
Right. In the mat room, we talk a lot about when force is required and how to create time, distance, and shielding so that you don't have to use force. And maybe we end up with 5 officers on scene instead of 2 officers using force. We have 5 people that have a display of force, and that's enough to put this person safely in handcuffs without any use of force. That's our ultimate goal. Right. Not always possible, right? So I enjoy that role in conjunction with my role as a negotiator, because to me, both are the same. We're trying to create a peaceful resolution, and it's just 2 different arenas, right? But the goal is the same.
Okay. You mentioned the Skagit County Crisis Negotiations is a team.
Right.
What does the makeup of that team look like?
So it's the entire Skagit County. We have members from Skagit County Sheriff's Office, from Anacortes Police, from Cedar Woolley Police, Mount Vernon, and Burlington. Okay. So we have members from each one of those agencies on our team. So we respond countywide.
Okay. And so does everybody respond at the same time, or is it just a couple of people? How does that call out
I'd
process
love it
work?
if everybody could respond at the same time.
Yeah.
Not always.
Okay.
You know, we have a decent sized team right now, but it may be 2 people that respond. It may be 7 or 8 of us that go out on a bigger scene. And then something for our commanders to be aware of is if this is going to be a prolonged incident, we need a backup plan. There's only so long that I can speak with a subject on the phone that's elevated before I'm going to be burnt out and not effective as a negotiator. So we need a backup team as well, right?
So when you get those like 7 people responding, you all can't be talking on the phone at the same time.
Right.
So what does the other people do while somebody's doing that communication piece?
I think a general misconception of negotiators is that they talk to people.
Okay.
And that's not inaccurate. But it's an entire team process. So yes, there's one person that talks with the subject in crisis. Then they have a coach that's in their ear the whole time. And the coach is helping them continue the conversation, coming up with new ideas to talk about, and they're filtering out information, or maybe filtering in information from our backgrounders. So we have 2 to 4 people, depending on the size of the call out and who's available, doing research on our persons in crisis. So they might reach out to family members, talk with them for a while. They might reach out to jobs. Maybe they're at school. We'll talk to those people. Because again, our hope as a crisis negotiation team is to end this situation peacefully.
Sure.
And if we can talk with somebody that maybe can say some kind things about them or get them thinking about future concepts, that's great.
Okay.
And that's our goal. So then, in addition to our background people, we have someone that's writing everything down. They're our scribe.
Okay.
A team leader, helping organize the process and coming up with the negotiation strategies. And sometimes an assistant team leader as well.
Okay.
Again, helping with that process and kind of plugging in wherever is necessary.
Sounds like a much more complicated process than like they show on TV.
Right. Yeah. And again, the misconception, I think a lot of people think you're talking to someone.
Right.
And when I know that negotiations are starting to work, is I start listening a lot more
Okay.
than talking.
Okay.
And that's kind of that turning point. You got to talk to some degree to get them engaged, that
Sure.
person. But once they really start talking to you and you're listening more than you're responding, our process is starting to work.
Okay. We see on TV a lot, and I still hear in some associations, a hostage negotiator.
Sure.
Is that what you are too, or is there a difference between crisis and hostage negotiators?
There's definitely similarities and differences,
Okay.
right?
How so?
So hostage situation, there's an obvious higher risk to other individuals, right, than someone by themselves that's maybe barricaded in a home. Perhaps they committed a crime and they need to be taken into custody, and we're there to help with that process, right? Whereas the hostage situation, they're maybe barricaded as well, but now they have somebody that is in the midst of that doesn't want to be, that's
Okay.
unwillingly there. So that ramps up the safety measure
Okay.
quite a lot. And there are different strategies that can be applied to both. But again, getting that person talking to us and starting to understand the reason why we're there, right? Why that person is there and why they're there now. So we ask that question a lot in our moments where we have time as a team. Why here, why now?
Right.
And then that helps a lot to understand that person's thought process and how we can develop a negotiation strategy. And for that, that's not any different necessarily for crisis situations versus a hostage. What is different is the danger that it poses to innocent people.
Okay. And how maybe our tactical team would respond.
Absolutely. Now that's going to be out of my area, but we work closely with both of our tactical teams that are in the area, Mount Vernon and Skagit County. We deploy with them for search warrants, so for planned events.
And why do you do that?
So when we go out on a search warrant, we need to let people know that we're there. And negotiators have a specific skill set of talking a lot, so it seems. And it helps with free up a SWAT operator. So now we can be the ones on the PA announcing that we're here for a search warrant, so-and-so needs to come out of the residence, that kind of thing. And then if we get into a situation where they do barricade, we're ready to deploy. We've got all the information. We're ready to go ahead and have a conversation with that person over the phone, in person, whatever it may need to be.
So you're there just kind of as the communicators, just in case something goes sideways. You're already there. We don't have to wait to then make that phone call to get you there. And I would imagine that as part of the background process that our tactical team does, you know, the safety considerations and those kind of things, that you guys are read into that.
Yeah, we absolutely are. A lot of times we help develop some of those plans and get phone numbers in and known associates or family members and that kind of stuff, so that we're ready if that situation doesn't progress safely or easily, or the subject decides to do something different than what we were hoping for. We're ready for that, and we can, like you said, be right there as soon as the situation turns.
Okay. How often do you see true hostage situations?
Thankfully, I haven't seen one, and I'd love to keep it that way.
Yeah.
But we train for it regularly. So we do training at least monthly as a team. And part of our training is scenario-based. So we may get actors to come in. Sometimes they're our newest officers as we're getting them integrated into the process.
Hey, new kid, come and do this.
Yeah, come and act for me. Yeah,
but it gives them a great opportunity to see the team work as well.
It does, because I think they're coming into this with some uncertainty as well, and they're naive to the process. Well, we get to show them how the whole team works. And it's not just one person talking. It's a whole process. So they're great to be our subjects in crisis or hostage takers. So the last event that I put on for, the training that I put on for our team, was a hostage situation. One that's based upon a real event. And it was at a school. So we put our negotiators through that event. And I had 2 new officers at the time. It was just perfect. So I had one as a hostage, one as the hostage taker.
Okay, but you've never seen an actual real life scenario that was a hostage type one. And I think we're fortunate that way. You know, I had the blessing to be on the team for 15 years-ish, and we never had one when I was part of the team either. I remember we had one where the subject in crisis said he had hostages. But you talked about the kind of the background process. As our backgrounders did, you know, some of that deep dive into what was going on and listen to some of the phone calls that had been made, they were able to find out pretty early on that, no, these people are friendly and that they're actually voluntarily. They're not being held against their will. Even though he used the term hostage, as a definition goes, it wasn't a true hostage situation. And so then we were able to work through that.
But without those backgrounders, would you have known that?
No.
Probably not.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, so the whole team working together is crucial to the process.
You talked about the importance of the team leader and being able to monitor that primary negotiator as to where they're at so they don't get burned out. Have you had situations like that's come into play?
Yeah, I have. Actually, personally, I was a primary negotiator for one of our situations that we had here in town. And after 6 or 7 hours, somewhere in that ballpark, I eventually got burnt out. And quite honestly, I didn't recognize it at first. I could tell that I was starting to get frustrated with this person. I have a decent amount of patience typically. And okay, we just keep going in circles. And my coach actually said, "Hey, Kenny, are you good?" And of course I said, "No, I'm fine, I'm fine." Well, we took a break finally, and I recognized, and I came to my team lead, and I think I need to be tapped out. And eventually we did. We transitioned to the next person on. But that was a face-to-face negotiation, and those are even more exhausting.
So what does that mean?
So face to face, that means you and me, right? We're talking right here.
Okay.
I'm probably not going to talk this close with someone in crisis. Okay.
I can imagine not.
Yeah, there's going to be some distance.
Yeah.
Maybe some items of cover in between us.
Because you talked about time, cover, and distance.
Right.
Being
I want all of those things
yeah.
so that I can be as safe as possible, and that person too. I want them to feel safe.
Yeah, so they don't perceive you necessarily as a threat.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, this particular one occurred at our jail.
Okay.
This individual had taken his pod, the area that they live, as, I don't know, his podium for whatever he needed to protest on that particular day. And he had got himself up in the rafters of the jail and created a nice little hammock. It's impressive how he had done that.
So climbed up in the
Oh,
rafters and made himself a hammock?
Hammock, yep, which he sat in for most of our negotiation. Okay. And then was going to be there. That's where he was going to have his stand, and by did he. He for sure did. Yeah. So we talked for about 7 hours, he and I. I don't want to talk about the specifics of what he wanted to explain, but he had some demands, he had some concerns. Agree with them or not, I understand why he may have felt the way that he did, because I listened, right? I listened with the intent to understand and with empathy, and we had a good conversation.
Good. I was actually on that one with you.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was team leader at the time, but I remember you coming out, and this person had something he wanted.
Yes, he did.
Right? He wanted breakfast.
He did.
A specific kind of breakfast.
Oh boy, he did. Was it specific?
What was that?
Well, right toward the beginning of the negotiation, we had a good connection right at first, and he complained profusely about the breakfast at the jail. And I thought, oh, what a good opportunity. Maybe I'll float the idea of him maybe getting a better breakfast if he comes down. Right. And he latched onto that pretty quick. And I thought, I used to work at the jail before I came here. So maybe we'll wake up an inmate worker. So it was in the middle of the night at the time. We'll have them come make, I don't know, some sausage and eggs. We'll figure something out. And we'll get him out of the rafters this way. That'll be a good, peaceful resolution. Well, no, that wasn't his intent at all. He decided he wanted biscuits and gravy from Mr. T's. Okay.
I can understand that.
Yeah, right? Why not? If you're going to go for it, right? So the nice thing about that is it opened up a conversation for me, right? So then I think we spent the better part of an hour talking about Mr. T's and biscuits and gravy and the best biscuits and gravy he's ever had. And we got away from it a little bit, and I was hoping to come back at it. Oh, maybe I will have somebody here at the jail make you some biscuits and gravy. But nah, he stuck to biscuits and gravy from Mr. T's the whole time. Yeah. And that's what he wanted.
And it was a difficult one because we made the decision, okay, in order to try to resolve this, we're going to do that.
Right.
But we ran into some challenges. Mr. T's wasn't open yet.
Right.
And so we actually had to get one of our community service officers to go and do that wake-up call, and we ended up getting it.
Yeah, we did.
And I remember back to the kind of, hey, I'm tapped out, I can't do this anymore. I remember you coming out and being like, hey, I'm done. And I said, no, you got one more thing we need to do. And because you had kind of had that connection with him, my rationale was, I want Kenny to be the guy offering it to him. Yeah. Hey, we've been through this together. I did this for you. You agreed to come down. Let's do this together. And ultimately, he did come down.
He did.
And I have one thing that I really kick myself for in that negotiation is I wish that I'd had you go and sit and ask for a bite of the biscuits and gravy, because you earned it too.
Oh, I certainly did.
You worked hard.
Yeah.
And I think he probably would have let you.
Oh, he would have let me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We were, we talk a lot in negotiations about developing influence with our person in crisis. And I think I absolutely developed influence over him, and I tested that multiple times throughout the negotiation. I had that fairly early. So no, I think he would have given me a bite.
Yeah.
We were friends.
Yeah.
I couldn't get him down right away, but eventually we got there.
Yeah. And I would say it's not unusual that we would have our negotiator go and meet with that person that had just voluntarily surrendered afterwards, because we do want to preserve that relationship in case we end up in another crisis with this person. So we can be like, hey, remember me? We worked together last time. We can get through this again.
Yep.
So yeah, I think you'd have done that.
Yeah. And I did meet with him, and we shook hands and talked for a minute.
Yeah.
And I didn't get a bite.
No.
Yeah.
You talked about that face-to-face communication. What other ways do you all in the team use to try to communicate with folks?
There's a lot of different methods. I think primarily we like to use just telephone communication. That is the best for our process. It allows us as a team to take breaks, right? Nobody wants to stay on the phone forever.
Right.
So we might take a break at 20 minutes into the conversation, and then we can get together as a group and talk about what's going well, maybe a direction that we need to go. And I think you end up with easier for the primary to stay locked in for a longer period of time. Whereas face-to-face, you don't get those breaks.
Yeah.
And almost always, we're having to yell across, I don't know, a structure, or in that case, the jail, which is very echoey. It's awful, you know. So I'm struggling to listen, struggling to hear, or struggling to be able to project my voice loud enough that he can hear, and there's no breaks. So it's very exhausting. Another way we communicate is over speakers. So PA systems through patrol cars or armored vehicles. And then I actually brought a device that we utilize quite regularly.
Tell us about this device.
So this is, the way I pitch it to people when we implement this into the house is it's a Bluetooth speaker that allows us to talk to you and you to talk to us.
Okay.
So it's a brink ball. It's basically a cell phone that's a speakerphone. We can throw this into a structure if we're not able to go in there yet, through a window, up a flight of stairs. It's fairly easy to get in there. It's a little bigger than a softball.
Yeah.
One of our guys on the team used to be a catcher for baseball, so he gets to throw this.
So he's your designated thrower?
He 100% is. And then once it's in there, we can hear everything that's going on in that room. And then they can hear us too. So maybe they're scared and they're barricaded inside of a bedroom. Well, this lets us get closer to where they are and start that process of, hey, we're here, we're not going anywhere, but we don't want to see you get hurt. We want you to come out. There's police officers here, but that's okay, we're here for you as well.
Right.
It allows us to break down some walls.
Okay.
Not literally.
Not literally. Good. Good. And you guys have had to use that a few times?
Yeah, that one's at the ready pretty much for any call out. Okay. We've definitely used it for that exact situation where we've thrown it into structures and gotten compliance. Sometimes they ignore it for a while. You can only ignore this for so long.
Yeah.
It's loud.
Yeah.
And then we're relentless in a good way. We're ready to continue talking, and we have lots of things when people aren't responding to us that we can continue with. Okay.
You mentioned training a little bit, one that you put on recently. What's kind of some of the initial and continuing training that someone selected for the negotiating team goes through?
Well, we integrate our team members right away into our training that we put on for our team. But definitely a requirement straight out of the gate is a 40-hour course of Negotiator Basic. Okay. And then we continue with that. So a lot of our individuals have at least the second course, and some of us have the third. So it's 120 hours of crisis negotiation training and hostage negotiation training. And then in addition to that, I've been on the team for 5 years now. We train at least once a month and have multiple deployments per year. So it allows for continual training.
Conferences and the like too?
Oh yeah, good question. Been to a couple different conferences. We have an organization in the northwestern states, right? Washington, Idaho, Oregon.
Alaska and Hawaii.
Alaska and Hawaii, thank you. Yeah.
I never got to go to Hawaii for a conference.
That would be where you need to go.
Yeah.
No, I got to go to one for that, and a great conference. Lots of debriefs, good information. And then recently we've gone to NTOA, the National Tactical Officer Association. So it's national, and we went to their negotiation conference. And again, debriefs, lots of individuals with many more degrees than I could ever hope for, helping us understand how individuals communicate and think and process things. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that, just briefly, that you worked at the jail.
I did.
Previous to coming here with us. What was that experience like?
That was great. I did about 3 years at Skagit County Jail. Initially, that wasn't my intent. I had hoped to get into law enforcement. And back at that time, lots of applicants, and the departments weren't hiring as frequently. I think police departments felt the burden of that economic crash
Yeah.
a little later.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have this skill set. I hadn't shown that I had the skill set yet. So going to the jail made a lot of sense for me, and I'm glad that I did, because it really helped me understand individuals I might be dealing with later
Okay.
from a different perspective. Because
Tell me
after
more.
they're in the jail for a period of time, whether it be a couple days or a couple months, you really get to know that person and spend hours with them every day, talking to them, checking on them. I have relationships that have lasted from professional relationships with other individuals who may have been incarcerated
Yeah.
that have lasted throughout my time here. And I enjoy getting to see those individuals,
Probably some that are doing well now.
Yeah.
And some that, the recidivism is still there.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I have a gentleman that was in most of the time that I was at the jail for about 3 years. He came and saw me here and followed up with me numerous times about how well he was doing. He was doing great.
Yeah.
And then at some point he had a hard time. And at this time I had a field training officer in my car, and we're going to go to this call, but you're doing great, but I'm probably going to handle this one.
This one's mine.
This one's mine, yeah. So I get there, and I said his name, and he heard me. And he looked up, and he immediately started crying, and just everybody called me Henthorn at the jail. So,
Yeah.
Oh, Henthorn. And he came up, and we just walked straight to the police car at that point.
Yeah.
And I helped him in what was necessary that night.
Right.
But it's just because of that relationship that I had with him at the jail. And he valued that.
Yeah.
And I think he's doing a lot better again.
That's good to
So,
hear.
yeah.
Sounds like you had, some respectful relationships
Oh, yeah.
with folks in the jail.
Absolutely.
And so that carried over. How about, learning communication styles in the jail? Does some of that carry over into the field as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Everybody talks in their own way. There's different cultures, whether it be how you grew up, where you grew up.
Yeah.
But being able to understand that and respect that, and not speak the language necessarily, but at least understand well enough that I can have an educated conversation with them.
Yeah.
It's been very helpful.
Good. So it'd be a good way if someone's considering a career in
Oh,
policing.
yeah.
The jail would be a good place to start. And if they love it, stay there. But if they're looking to get out and become a patrol officer someday, that's a good place to start and learn.
It's great. I wouldn't have changed it for anything.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't what I intended, but I'm so glad that I had that experience.
What made you decide you wanted to apply to be a crisis negotiator?
Before I started, even at the jail, I worked in sales,
Okay.
and I enjoyed those sales conversations in retail. I was trying to get them to buy whatever product, but I liked qualifying them for that product.
Yeah.
And I looked at that a lot like selling something to somebody in a crisis.
Yeah.
And it's a little harder because a lot of times I'm selling handcuffs, quite honestly,
Right.
which makes it a little bit more challenging.
A little bit.
But it's the same skill set, and I enjoy talking to people. I really do. And I've had people on negotiations before say, oh, this is just your job. Well, yeah, okay, I'll give you that. That's right. But I'm only here because I want to be.
Right.
I put in for this position. I did the time and the training. I want to be here. I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
I enjoy people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talked about deploying out several times throughout the year. What kinds of things are most frequent that you guys end up deploying on?
I'd say there's be two different scenarios. One would be planned operations, where we have a search warrant for a house or an individual, and we're ready to take that person into custody, but maybe they pose a pretty good, significant risk to the public and to officers.
Okay.
So we go out with a SWAT team, and then those are the planned operations. And then myself and another negotiator will usually ride in the front of the armored vehicle, and we'll provide announcements.
Okay.
And then the other is going to be barricaded subjects. So perhaps we have an individual who needs to be taken into custody, and it's a more immediate situation, right? It had just occurred.
Okay.
And that person has now barricaded themselves in the house.
Okay.
that one we come out to regularly.
So barricaded in the house then doesn't want to come out.
Right. Doesn't
Right.
want to come out. Now, here we are. I got to sell handcuffs.
Right.
And yeah, so.
Okay. And so seeking that voluntary surrender.
Yep.
So it doesn't escalate into that use of force.
Always what we're trying to avoid.
Okay. Well, I got to say, I'm really proud of our team. While I was on there, I got the opportunity, I was blessed to be able to travel across the country and present on one of our scenarios we had. But they really gave me an opportunity to see a lot of other debriefs and how other teams work and other situations that they've been involved in. And I could really say that on my time on the team that I was comfortable with our team negotiating any scenario that came up and that we could be as effective as any other team out there across the nation because of the people we had.
Yep.
And even though I've left the team, I still am a little bit connected and I see the people we have and the talent that we have on the team. And I still feel that same way. That wraps up this edition of the Roll Call Room. If you enjoyed this conversation, hit subscribe and check out our Facebook and Instagram pages so you never miss an update. We'll see you next time right here in the Roll Call Room.